The first chapter of the Bible describes how God created the world in 6 days out of nothing. Everything we see is a result of our Lord's creative handiwork, and He sustains it by His power. Today, we will practice our Español with 2 very well-known verses from the first chapter of the Bible. Greetings, my amigos, and welcome to Misionali. My name is Roberto, and this is where we learn Spanish through the Bible. Now, if you haven't already done so, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others. So now, my amigos, let's begin. En el principio, Dios creó los cielos y la tierra. Now, this is a wonderful verse to memorize, so once you learn it, keep it handy with you and repeat it whenever you can until you have it 100%. ¿De acuerdo? Agreed? Excelente. En el principio means in the beginning. The tougher word here will be principio. Now, it can mean beginning, like it does here, or principle, as in a rule or belief. We've actually seen this one before. Again, in Spanish, when the letter C is followed by an E or an I, it has an S sound. So, let me give you a couple of examples. Doce, doce. Oración, oración. Does that make sense? Muy bien. Now, in this particular word, the emphasis is located on the CI. So we have principio, principio. Next, we have Dios creó, which means God created. Dios means God, as most of you know. But let's look at it a little more closely regarding the pronunciation. Now, we've learned in other videos that in Spanish, there are strong vowels, A, E, and O, and weak vowels, I and U. When a weak vowel and a strong vowel are next to each other in a word, they create one syllable. But the stress of pronunciation has to be on the strong vowel. So in this case, we have an I and an O, so you have to stress the O while making the sound. Now, let me first mispronounce it and put the emphasis on the I. Dios, Dios. Now the correct way. Dios, Dios. A little faster. Dios. Did you hear the difference? Muy bien. Creó means created, past tense, and is from the verb crear, to create. Now note that there's an accent on the O, so that is where you stress the pronunciation. Creó, creó. Now as a side note, this verb is very similar to creer, which means to believe. So it's important to be careful when you pronounce each of these because they can completely change the meaning of what you're saying. Note the difference. Crear, crear. Creer, creer. Got it? So far then, we have En el principio Dios creó. Los cielos y la tierra means the heavens and the earth. Now, note the agreements with the definite article and the noun in each case. Cielos ends with OS, so we have los. Tierra ends with A, so we have la. Now, as we've seen before, there are exceptions, but most of the time, you will see these agreements. So now let's look at the pronunciation. As we just saw in an earlier example, there's a weak and a strong vowel in cielos. So here we emphasize the E. Cielos, cielos. We also see the same thing in tierra, but note that we have a double R. So 2 things. First, emphasize the E and trill the R. Tierra, tierra. A whole verse then is, En el principio, Dios creó los cielos y la tierra. ¿Todo bien? All good? Let's go to the next verse. Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. A imagen de Dios lo creó. Varón y hembra los creó. Now, this seems like a long and complicated verse, and you might think, this is too much. I can understand it. However, let me point out a few things, and you'll see that this verse is actually not that difficult to comprehend at all. I've actually already given you the base in our first example. First, let's go over the repeated words. We have Dios twice, and we have creó 3 times. Now, we just learned the meaning and pronunciation of both of these words in our first example. Next, we have imagen twice. The word means image, which you can probably guess from its spelling. Pronounce it with the emphasis on the MA. Imagen. Imagen. Pretty easy, right? So now that we have the repeated words out of the way, let's break down the rest of the sentence. Al hombre means the man, although in the English version it just says man. Remember, al is a contraction of a plus l. And unless L has an accent over the E, or L is part of a formal name like El Salvador, you will always combine A plus L to make al. So far, our verse is, Dios creó al hombre. A imagen suya means in his image. Now you see here the possessive pronoun suya, which means his, follows the noun imagen. If you want it to be a little less formal, you could simply say a su imagen, which has the same meaning, in his image. But here, a bit more formality is used, so it puts the possessive pronoun after the noun. Basically, the writer wants us to know that this image belongs to God and Him alone. We are simply image bearers of God, not the creators of our own image. This, my amigos, should humble us. You see that suya is capitalized. This is because it's referring to Dios. Now when pronouncing it, put the emphasis on the first syllable. Suya. Suya. Let's repeat what we have so far. Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. So far so good. See, I told you it wasn't too difficult. Let's continue. A imagen de Dios lo creó means in the image of God he created him. Now we already know what these words mean, but let me point out a couple of things which I believe will be very helpful. At the beginning of the verse, we see Dios creó, God created. Well, we know who created, God. But here we see creó by itself at the end of the section. Here, creó means he created. Now, obviously, because of context, we know that he refers to God, even though he is not spelled out. In Spanish, the tense of the verb, or what is called the conjugation of the verb, can, most of the time, tell you who it's referring to without using the subject pronoun, he in this case. Does that make sense? Muy bien. What about lo? What's that referring to? In this context, it's the pronoun him. He created him. Lo creó. So in this case, lo is actually referring back to al hombre, the man. Now note that they're both singular, so they agree with each other. For more practice, we'll see a plural example in the next section. Claro, clear? Excelente. Our verse so far then is, Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. A imagen de Dios lo creó. Varón y hembra los creó. Means male and female, he created them. Varón means male. Note that there's an accent over the O, so the pronunciation is varón. Varón. Hembra means female. Remember, the H in Spanish is silent, so here we have hembra. Hembra. Now, we just learned that creó means he created. Last time it was referring to a single male, so the pronoun was singular, lo. Here, however, we have two people, varón y hembra, so the pronoun has to be plural. Now, this is why you see los, them, and not lo, him. Make sense? Muy bien. Now, in Spanish, when you have more than one person and it's a mix of men and women, the pronoun defaults to the masculine version. This is why you see los and not las. Claro? Clear? Excelente. So now let's do our whole verse. Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. A imagen de Dios lo creó. Varón y hembra los creó. Now, as a final exercise, let's repeat both verses, one time at a slower speed and one time at a normal conversation speed. En el principio, Dios creó los cielos y la tierra. Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. A imagen de Dios lo creó. Varón y hembra los creó. Now at regular speed. En el principio, Dios creó los cielos y la tierra. Dios creó al hombre a imagen suya. A imagen de Dios lo creó. Varón y hembra los creó. Well, mis amigos, I hope that you enjoyed our time together and that these exercises are helping your Spanish to improve. As always, thank you so much for your time, and Lord willing, I will see you in the next video.